Inspire Creativity and turn it into an Archon of Cruelty. So we're going to get right down to the game of Zachary Bigelow with 5-color creativity versus Daniel Weiser with Azorius Control.
And Daniel Weiser, a face that should be familiar to you if you have been following the NRG series. He played in our 2023 championship and won an RC with his take on Azorius Control in Pioneer, now showing up with the same archetype, clearly a control master, is Daniel Weiser in Modern. And we are going to see, you mentioned a little bit of color splash. We see that off of the Spar's headquarters there, followed up by the Otawara. Just some land positioning. Both of these decks, really fair decks at heart, even if the creativity has a little bit this proactive combo going on. It kind of has that traditional combo control feel to it that a lot of modern decks, I mean, since the era of like Splinter Twin, have had, and very powerful strategies in that regard. Even has copies of Reprieve to really build on that and get that Remand Harken kind of going with it. But Daniel Weiser, I mean, going to respect the archetype, and especially once you start seeing every land's a mountain, you should be starting to sniff out some Dwarven Mines. I think that's exactly what we're watching here as he's considering his 4th land drop. Not a spell cast by either player yet this game.
Yeah, so we see Daniel Weiser has the One Ring in his hand. Now, you could deploy that here on an empty board, but the threat, if it's on Daniel's radar, that Zachary could untap, play Dwarven Mine, get a Dwarf, play Inspire Creativity, the 4 mana, turn an Archon, the game could just be over right then and there, but maybe not. Maybe then you play a Teferi, bounce it or something, or you can Solitude exile it, pitching a Reprieve, which you can pitch to Solitude, unlike Remand, which you cannot. So it looks like the Azorius Control player is going to be just fine. You know, play land and play land go and see what you got, creativity deck.
Yeah, I think in general, like if you talk about getting down to blow by blow, playing fair Magic, the Azorius Control deck is going to be favored in that long game. It is set up to only play a fair deck. You're not comboing anybody out with your Solitudes and your Counterspells and all that. There's no punchline there, and so. Really the spot for Zachary, once he kind of identifies what he's up against in this 4-color control deck, is really to find his spot. He needs to have enough interaction to back up his proactive plan and really execute it. And honestly, he might have to do it more than once. Archon is very easy for the Azorius Control deck to answer, and no creatures to sacrifice diminishes its impact right away. It's an uphill battle from the start, and honestly, he's going to probably try to lean more on his Fable the Mirror Breakers and protecting those in order to try to get through the game than anything like the Archon combo. But the threat of the Archon combo is still going to be a factor through the entirety of this game.
Yeah, so like you said, the control deck is very happy. Just the longer the game goes on, the longer the control deck will be in the reins. A 5-color creativity has some cards that on their own are dead cards. Inspire Creativity, you have to have other things to do that with. Meanwhile, the control deck just have removal spells, card draw, interaction. All their cards matter a lot more. Plus, if you look at the 5-color creativity side, they have 3. Zachary has 3 copies of Spell Pierce in his deck. So, like, as the game goes on, those Spell Pierces lose value, and like they're really Zachary's really incentivized to try to combo maybe turn 5 or 6, so you can play Inspire Creativity, maybe 1 or 2 Spell Pierces before the Azorius Control can just untap, start playing Omnaths and Rings, and get the card advantage in that way.
Yeah, you see, still neither player casting a spell. I mean, the Murders of Krolov Manor Surveillance kind of count. That's kind of a spell. But yeah, neither player has actually cast a spell yet. We're well into turn 4 and 5, and it really shows both players have kind of identified what's going on here and are going to just be jockeying for position the entire time. And a traditional control texture, where just whoever misses the land drop first is kind of priced into some kind of action. But these Surveillance, as we see Meticulous Archive coming down for Daniel Weiser, really helps smooth that out. So we're going to be able to hit land drops even longer than normal. I mean, Daniel hasn't even bought Kahira, which still wouldn't count as casting a spell. It's a special action. But, we haven't even spent really any mana at all through the course of this game. And it really shows the density of kind of interaction that both players are working with, that we're holding this position like this, and is a stark contrast to what we saw in round number 1.
We see all 5 colors of Magic represented on both sides, and with that, all colors available for both players. Not a spell has been cast, which is really fun to look at Modern, as opposed to our last match, where we're just like, creatures on turn 1, ramp spells on turn 1. So despite the title of Daniel's deck being Azorius Control, he does have access to all 5 cards and play for that Leyline Binding, even though there's no black cards in the deck or sideboard outside maybe 1 Ashiok Dreamrender. So really, we're at a high noon situation, to use a bit of OTJ cowpoke.
Sure, yeah.
And, like, who's going to fire first? Like, I don't know. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's going to happen here, but it looks like something has to happen. We can't just be here all day watching lands being played. Eventually, someone's going to get a hand of 7 cards. There's 7 spells, and we're going to see some fireworks fly.
We do see Zachary here on turn number 6, reaching for some mana. Maybe considering making a play, stacking all the lands on top of each other. They all make red. I'm gonna crack another fetch. All right, no spells yet. Don't panic. Don't panic. Nobody's casting a spell. We're good. We're good. Just gonna maybe make a dwarf. Yeah, okay. First non-land game object added to the board. As here comes the dwarf off of Dwarven Mine. I believe the powerful common from the Wilds of Eldraine, or not Wilds of Eldraine, Throne of Eldraine.
Throne of Eldraine, the OG
part of the
Eldraine.
Mystic Sanctuary cycle. Less powerful, still making a modern impact. Actually legal, unlike Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, I mean, I have died to dwarves before, sometimes as a 1/1, sometimes as a 7, as an Archon of Cruelty, but this is a threat. Sure. It is a threat that Daniel has to answer. We have an 18-turn clock in play. But we'll see if Zachary can maybe up the clock all here.
All right. So, okay. Well, happy to go for creativity here right away. Looks like 5 mana up for Daniel. And you have to imagine some interaction going to be in hand to interact with whatever Daniel might have access to respond to this creativity. But here's creativity for one. Fairly modest. I honestly wouldn't even be that surprised, like with the Leyline Binding pulled to the front of Daniel's hand. He just lets it happen. It's like, whatever. I'll pick off the Archon or whatever. That's not even that scary and holds to the interaction. We'll see. Looks like
kind of
Leyline Binding response here. Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of play I see from Zachary is like, maybe he has 3 copies of Inspired Creativity in his hand and he just start deploying threats and maybe eventually Daniel will be out of respectable answers to it. But we do see Leyline Binding in play. If Leyline Binding can take care of this dwarf, Inspired Creativity will have no legal targets and will be fizzled, as it were, and will not resolve.
Worth noting as well, in Zachary's Creativity deck, the only creatures in the entire deck list are 3 copies of Archon of Cruelty. Once all 3 are gone, they are out. And here comes Reprieve looking to, I believe, bounce his creativity back to hand.
Yeah, this is the classic. We've been remanding your own spell when it's counterspelled. We've been doing this since Ravnica City of Guilds, I believe. And it's still good. It is a 2-for-1 for 2 mana, and it's a good 2-for-1 too. You get to keep back your lovely spell. But we've got double Reprieve action. You know what? In fact, I'll reprieve your Reprieve. So your Reprieve does not reprieve your creativity, and Leyline Binding will resolve on the dwarf token. Inspired Creativity is not resolved, and we'll pass turn back to Daniel.
When you talk about the impact of the Lord of the Rings set, Tales of Middle-earth on Modern, a lot of times you highlight cards like Orcish Bowmasters in the One Ring. Reprieve here, certainly seeing an outsized impact to what it normally is. Oh, and how about bounce back my Leyline Binding with my Teferi? So we're just bouncing all the spells back to hand. See, you cast the spells and you bounce them back to hand. That's actually the whole, you don't want to cast too many spells. You don't want to get people alarmed here. No, we're going to bring them all back. But Teferi, I mean, honestly, has a huge impact on this game, no longer allowing Zachary to protect his wins, or his rather, at least his Archon of Cruelties with interaction does mean that it's going to eat a lightning bolt. Got to get that one off the table, or else the control deck is going to be able to outmaneuver you at every point in the game. We'll see if Zachary has any follow-up that he wants to play. It looks like the answer is no.
Yeah, if I was in Daniel's seat, I'd be feeling pretty good. I think there's about 3 2-for-1s that have happened so far on the blue-white control side, and that's what Azorius control players love to do, is get the 2-for-1. So, but again, like Zachary Bigelow, his deck has a larger impact once things get going. So he could come back. Maybe all you need is 1 more mind, 1 more creativity, and then Daniel will have to figure out how to navigate this world that he may see himself in. But I'd be feeling pretty good if I was Daniel. But the game ain't over yet. The life total is 17 all. So we'll see. Anything can happen.
And I mean, these are the kinds of exchanges too. I mean, to highlight a little bit of what Zachary's gone through so far, these are the exchanges you need to make happen, where you talk about, he went for it on turn 6, was able to force 2 answers from Daniel. That's going to be a big part of this. Obviously, he's going to have a ton of interaction. You need to start to work through that interaction and, really being able to force action the Leyline Binding, which you now know about is back in hand. That's something that's transparent now. And also have that interaction backup to answer your Reprieve. Did actually force Daniel's hand to have a lot there. Now, he did have it, which does mean that Zachary's a little bit behind. But again, these are cards you're going to have to work through over the course of this game, no matter what. And so, a good exchange for Zachary as far as positioning himself to actually have a chance in this game as the game goes on, even if that specific kind of interaction fight did not go his way. As we head back his way right now, no play on the main phase from Daniel. Very patient is he, as we see copies of the One Ring and Teferi in Daniel's hand. Not deploying either of those quite yet.
Yeah, Daniel also has a Subtlety in his hand, which cannot hit a lot in Zachary's deck. Archon of Cruelty is really hard to hardcast in the deck. Sure, you can do it with some treasure tokens or some goblins or what have you. But so Daniel's keeping up the One Ring on his turn. He's got Subtlety. I believe there's another Teferi in Daniel's hand, but you don't want your shields to be down too much, otherwise you could get got. And this game is Daniel's game to lose right now, so Zachary is incentivized to start making some plays at some point. But it looks like we're gonna have just a naked subtlety. It's a 3/3 flash flyer for 4. That ain't nothing,
But definitely, like thing is, it's going to get reprieved. It's nothing in the fact that it's going back to hand. But yeah, I mean, no, you're right. That is quite a bit of pressure, and Zachary obviously needs a little bit more time in order to actually assemble, some kind of reasonable threat against Daniel, who now seems content to fire off a Teferi. He has 5 mana left over. Have to imagine he's got a few things to do with that 5 mana.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Daniel was very happy for that subtlety to be reprieved. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll play Teferi. Yeah, you can reprieve this too. I'm not under pressure by you. So like, you can remand my spells all day. I don't mind. That's not going to stop me from winning. Eventually, you'll be out of reprieves, and I'll be able to stick these threats or these card advantage engines. Subtlety being the threat in the deck is kind of funny when you think about it. Normally, that's not how that card is described. But here it is. Daniel's doing stuff, and Zachary needs to make a play to actually have some presence in this match so far.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what you were firing off these reprieves for. You're right that like Dan doesn't really care about getting his stuff reprieve, but at the same token, those reprieves are expiring for Zachary. These Teferis are coming down. You don't really have a lot of hard answers to them still in the deck. You have to kind of pick them off with permanents. Not where you want to be. As here comes Pillage the Bog. Talk to me about Pillage the Bog.
Yeah, so Pillage the Bog, a new card from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. It is the rare. There's only 2 cards where the plot is larger cost than the mana value. So Pillage the Bog is up there on your screen. It's a 2-mana sorcery. You look at the top X cards of your library, where X is twice the land. So right now we're looking at 14 cards, which is a lot. Or you can plot it for 3 mana, maybe on turn 3, and later on turn 7, like right now, you're seeing these 14 cards, which turns this from a Anticipate into Demonic Tutor, kind of on that spectrum as the game goes on. And this is a really sweet additive to the deck. So here we have Subtlety just as a threat. You're gonna plot this Pillage. This Pillage has been plotted. The Bog is plotted, and while your shields are down, here's a 3/3 flash for 4. See if I get the beats in. But Lightning Bolt takes out that 3 toughness, which has kind of been the bane. Lightning Bolt's target. 3 toughness, juicy. Let's go. And we're back to Daniel's turn.
And a good exchange actually there for Zachary. I think your lightning bolts aren't that good in the matchup either. And being able to keep Daniel from closing this game out can actually be good. I mean, there is a chance Daniel floods as this game goes on. And you're going to be able to overpower what's going on thanks to the power of Pillage of the Bog and cards of that, giving you some selection. But this Teferi is going to put a damper on a lot of what Zachary can have in order to back his own combo up. Now needs to look to resolve something like his own Teferi, which of course we know Subtlety can do at least a little bit of a good job temporarily taking care of that for a period of time. But these reprieves are mostly cashed out. Spell pierces, don't really want to draw them at this point because they're going to be pretty dead. A lot of the stuff that needs to happen at instant speed is taken care of, which actually diminishes the impact of this Teferi, which is ticked up to 5, doesn't even draw a card. But we're going to reach for Leyline Binding, a 1-mana answer to the Teferi, which did not get any value right away. We'll see if we want to interact with this. Leyline Binding with the trigger on the stack, prevent it from exiling in the first place. So that's the sequence there for Daniel. Cannot respond thanks to Teferi Time Raveler. Oh my goodness. How about another one? Yeah, you see a little chuckle there from Zach. Leyline Binding, the Leyline Binding. So I can Leyline Binding, Leyline. Okay, yeah. We all play the same cards. We reprieve everything. We Leyline Binding everything. This is in a lot of ways kind of a mirror match. You're seeing that manifest a little bit in the cards, even if the decks are named and function quite differently.
Yeah, so we see all these white instant speed cards that kind of can be a little confusing, but the end result is you want your spells to resolve and in play. Okay, all the Leyline Bindings happen. We've got a binding over binding. This is tricky because maybe Daniel has a Teferi in play, and then you can bounce your own Leyline Binding or something, and then Legend Roll Teferi. So now with these threats being diminished, Zachary's running out of lightning bolts. He's running out of spell pierce. Spell pierce is running out of value, and he's running out of reprieves. Maybe we turn this into more of a mid-range game, and he can resolve some of his Fables of the Mirror Breaker. That is a card that oftentimes Azorius Control doesn't have a clean answer to. You can counterspell it is probably the cleanest answer in the game, but these Fables that Zachary's probably looking for might be the way out. I know if I was Zachary, I resolved this Pillage the Bog, I might be pillaging for some Fables because as time goes on, my creativity combo is kind of looking a little shakier, and so we'll see if Zachary can get some threats in play and not just die and succumb to Daniel's barrage of 2/4s.
Yeah, he goes for Teferi. Daniel wastes no time slamming the Subtlety in response. Not even any mana up for Zachary to spawn if he wanted to. He cannot have Reprieve or Spell Pierce on the Blood Crypt Stomping Ground lands that were left untapped. And now there is a Subtlety in play for Daniel. A card he's been trying to resolve for 3 or 4 turns now, able to finally get across the red zone and get some damage done to Zachary's life total. Looking to end this game before it gets out of control is Daniel Weiser, who adds the 1 ring to the mix.
Yeah, that is the fastest subtlety I think I've ever seen in my life. Daniel knew if you try to resolve this or resolve a spell, no thanks. Subtlety, here it comes. So with subtlety in play, now Daniel is firmly in the driver's seat, and I believe he's identified that he's got a threat. Zachary's at 11, 4-turn clock. So I'm going to go. So Daniel also played the 1 ring. He just tried to, you know what? I think you cannot combo me this turn with my defenses that I have in my hand. So I'll play some card advantage engines, and here's a Teferi, another Teferi, and we'll see probably the same Teferi on top, and a counterspell. I'm going to try to take care of this Planeswalker. Zachary's like, you know what? Counterspell is still good. That counts, and Teferi will hit the graveyard.
Yeah, an important counterspell to have for Daniel there. You mentioned some trickery with Leyline Bindings and stuff of that like. Certainly, I think the direction that Zachary wanted to go, this copy of One Ring does actually, the protection does protect you against Archon. I believe that his target opponent on that card. So can't even really do any of that this turn. And obviously, as the game goes on, this One Ring is going to start to snowball the game in Daniel's favor. Yeah, so it's time to get some action done this turn. And I believe Zachary is identifying that as well, going for this Pillage of the Bog that was plotted a couple turns ago with the counterspell cast from Daniel, and another counter spell coming down on Pillage the Bog. I'm going to counter all your spells, says Daniel, and definitely a lot of pressure to get these cards out of his hand as the One Ring is going to refill it quickly.
Yeah, Daniel's quite fond of his bog, so there'll be no pillaging today under the watch of
Don't touch my bog.
Of counterspell. No, it's my bog. My bog, my counter spells, my board state. So the one ring is doing what it does best and is going to draw 3 cards for it. So Daniel's under a slight clock from the One Ring, but greatness to any cost. And then attack for 3. Put Zachary down to 8. So Daniel's firmly yet again in the driver's seat with this ring, with his bog. And here comes Kahir, who we pick up the 3/2. You love to see it. Maybe keep in your hand.
If you want, can grow the Subtlety next turn, give it vigilance. Options.
In fact, Zachary is at 8 with that attack for 3. So with the Kahir in play next turn, that does make it a 2-turn clock, I believe. So I'm very excited to see this elemental beat down.
Oh, and here comes Pillage the Bog. Just the manual mode. No plot on this one as Daniel's giving it another read. Didn't see any counter magic. Not sure if we have a way to respond to this one. And okay, sure, says Daniel. And a bunch of cards looking at here. Still 14? Like it's still
14 cards. Go ahead, pillage away. Yeah, so Zachary here has got a couple things he's looking for. I'm sure Fable is okay, but this Subtlety will eventually be his downfall. So what kind of cards do you think Zachary be looking here, Drake?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is you need to get this One Ring off the table. Like there's a predominant, and I think we see the Leyline Binding in that mix as well. Like you have a much higher priority on Leyline Binding, even though you really need to get something started. You need to answer the Subtlety. There's a lot of problems as Daniel's beginning to snowball this game, but the One Ring is really, it's going to bury you. No matter what you do, it's too late for Wrenn and 6, a card we haven't talked about too much, but is a namesake of this creativity deck. It's not going to catch you up. It's not going to keep up. Same is true for Fable the Mirror Breaker. That card's not really going to be able to keep up until you get this ring off the board. So between the cards that Zachary's looking at now and the cards he has access to in hand, he needs to have an answer to the One Ring and have something to do, something to get the game started. Now, Fable the Mirror Breaker is probably the best of that bunch, but one card is, we need more than one card. And I believe Fable is the find. And if you can't assemble both, maybe Fable can find you an answer to the One Ring. But no matter what, if you want to win this game, this One Ring needs to get off the board because you're not just going to be able to beat it in the heads up. Is Zachary Bigelow, and here is a look at the powerful Rare Saga from Neon Dynasty. This card made waves across every format it is legal in. And, some people maybe argued too strong. A lot of rate for one thing. Makes a 2/2 Goblin Shaman token. Whenever it attacks, makes a treasure token, kind of the iconic aspect of this card. Going to take care of that right away with Solitude is Daniel Weiser.
Yeah, so if Zachary looked for a 1-for-1 answer for the One Ring, that's one thing you could do. 1-for-1 answer for the Subtlety, but those plays don't really help Zachary win. They help Zachary not lose and not even great at that. So I think Fable is definitely the card that I'd be looking for the most because it does make Daniel have to have an answer for it. He did in the form of Solitude, but then maybe you discard 2 lands or 2 cards that don't matter, maybe Spell Pierce, and you find 2 more threats, maybe more Fables with your Fable. So I think that's the strategy that Zachary's chosen that I also would want to do. Now, this isn't great because Daniel now has 2 elementals in play, answer the token, a 3rd elemental will play in the form of
Omnath joining the party.
Creation. All these elementals, elemental rich. So if I was Zachary, I'd be thinking, maybe, how much time is left in this round? This is 1 game. I've got to win 2 more games to win this match. And thinking about, has that door fully slammed on my shot for winning this match? And maybe I should concede to think about my options for the later games.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And it's honestly not even going to take that long to finish, assuming Daniel does choose to deploy the Kahira. Solitude able to attack this turn, was cast on the last turn, as here comes Teferi Time Raveler. And that would give Subtlety and Solitude a bunch of extra power, get the game over with relatively quickly. No blockers for Zachary at the moment, and dwindling life total already at half of the original. It does mean that he's going to die relatively quickly, and so you might as well see this one out. Going to need a lot of help to actually close the door in this game, as Kahira is going to get deployed as well. And here comes the Vigilant attacking Elementals. I believe that's going to be 8 damage. And 4 points of life for Daniel. Could matter, but very likely not. As you said, the door on this game seems to have slammed shut, as I believe Solitude, Subtlety, and another form of interaction in Daniel's turn over what looks to be the last turn for Zachary, as he picks up the 1 ring just to save a little bit on life. The ultimate flex.
Yep. If Daniel has 7 cards in hand, threats in play, Teferi in play, that nice warm aura of Teferi washing over you as you have him play, it's just a great feeling. But Zachary's like, I'm going to go ahead and pitch a Ren and 6 and an Archon. Sometimes these decks run some Persist, maybe do some Reanimator side action. None in Daniel's list. He's got Spell Pierce to really push through that combo. But having the game go on this long isn't exactly where Zachary wants to be with the creativity deck. So we're going to see what he can answer with. And, I'm going to cast creativity on this dwarf from this mine and see what you got. I don't even know if the Archon would be enough to save a Zachary, but, you got to give your best shot. And
see what you draw, whatever. I mean, try to cast it. Obviously, force Daniel's action, who does have another copy of Solitude, to pick off that dwarf. And that means it's all over. Dead on board is Zachary Bigelow. And to game number 2 we go. A decisive and convincing victory in game number 1 for our 2023 NRG Championship competitor, Daniel Weiser. A Control Master, certainly displaying his prowess there. And Pillage the Bog, though, looks to be a pretty powerful new tool for Zachary Bigelow and his creativity deck we haven't seen too much over the last few years of Modern. Now making a pretty big comeback here, new tools, and going to need some help against Daniel Weiser.
So now we're looking at the sideboards here. So we've got Zachary Bigelow and 5-color creativity. The sideboard has, a bunch of crazy cards that maybe we probably wouldn't bring in. 2 Alpine Moon, 2 Pick Your Poison, 2 Silence, 2 Terastodon, 2 Veil of Summer, and then we got an Anger of the Gods, 1 Elish Norn of each variety, Branson Abide, and Mother Machines. Hidetsugu consumes all and Eternity Earth. Drake, what do you think Zachary's be looking to bring in against this Azorius controls, elemental beatdown kind of 4-color stuff?
Yeah, the cards that immediately leap out to me are the cards Silence and Veil of Summer. Both cards kind of accomplishing the same goal, going about it a little bit differently, stopping the counter spells from stopping your creativities. I think at your core, you aren't going to beat the Azorius control deck in the heads up. So trying to convert to just a fair deck is not going to be good enough. You probably want to trim a little bit on some of your combo. You don't need that many pieces. You are probably going to play a fairly long game. You're going to be able to find your piece. You don't need to execute it quickly, but your creativity stuff still needs to be part of the plan. And in order to punch that through, your Silences and Veil of Summers really seem to make that happen. Now, the big question for me is exactly the direction he wants to go. I think if you're putting Terastodon in your deck, you don't do that without some intentionality behind it. And whether or not trying to blow up the lands of your own lands in this control matchup is what you want to do versus Archon. I can tell you Archon, pretty mitigated impact against control. I could see wanting to switch up your threats a little bit, either bringing in like the Elish Norn or getting a Terastodon involved somewhere, just kind of splitting your combo creatures. I don't know exactly what the configuration that Zachary has planned for that, but I would imagine there's going to be some changes right there on that, given the amount of targets he has in his sideboard.
Yeah, so with these combo decks, you kind of want to decide post board: am I going to double down on my combo with these silences, and these Veil of Summers, or do I want to do more of a mid-range strategy? Maybe Elish Norn and other machines can stop all these enemy elementals from doing their thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But I would imagine you're right that Zachary wants to double down on these going down the combo route. So now if we take a look at Daniel Weiser and Blue-White Azorius Control, in their sideboard, we've got, yet again, 3 Pick Your Poisons, a couple Veil of Summers, So far, the same on both sides. That's modern for you right now. 2 Aether Gust, a Stern Scolding, 1 Kahir, which isn't really a sideboard card. Dovin's Veto, Mystical Dispute, Oust, Dress Down, Blossoming Calm, and Ashiok Dreamrender. What do you think Daniel's going to be bringing in here, Drake, against this combo deck?
Yeah, so this is kind of the issue where you're already heads up pretty good against this deck, I think. I would imagine this is a favorable matchup for Daniel Weiser. You are kind of doing the same thing they're doing, but you're better at it, just doing the control game plan. I would imagine he's looking to make some small adjustments on this interaction suite, maybe a little bit less of like the Supreme Verdict removal style stuff, a little bit less maybe even on like the Omnath style stuff, and go heavier on the true control, like hard control aspects, things like Aether Gust, really good at getting through cards like Veil of Summer against creativity. Cards like Dovin's Veto, Mystical Dispute, those can play as well if that's the direction you want to go. The cards that matter in this matchup usually are non-creatures, talking about Wrenn and 6, Fable, the Mirror Breaker, and creativity, of course. And so you're probably going to want to pick up those negate type effects, Dovin's Veto, Aether Gusts, and the going really hard on it would be like your own Veil of Summers. We saw these decks kind of more or less want to play the same cards. They're looking to play the same, very similar game plan. We saw that with Reprieve. We saw that with Leyline Binding. Veil of Summer is kind of the same story there as far as, okay, this card's the best thing to be doing really in your control asymmetry. How hard Daniel wants to go on that with Reprieve in his mix, I'm not sure, but it's certainly an option he could bring in if he wants to.
Cool. Yeah. So it looks like post-sideboard games with these 2 decks are going to be more non-creature, counterspell oriented. And it looks like Zachary is mulliging to 5 on the play, which, you don't like to see, but sometimes maybe you play Wrenn 6 on 2, which I don't think Azorius Control. It has Leyline Binding with a couple of tri-lands, so maybe that could be an answer. But if you maybe stick a Wrenn 6 on turn 2 and you get a land every turn, you can unmulligan yourself really quickly. So it's not the end of the world that Zachary's mulliganing to 5, much less let's just hope he doesn't go any lower. But we're going to see if Zachary does keep 5 cards out of the 7 as he's going into game 2.
When you talk about old Magic, a lot of times you talk about when it is correct to take the draw in a match. Modern Magic, there's so many snowballs and things like that taking the play is generally always correct. Used to be arguments in control matchups to take the draw, but in this matchup in particular, I think there's a lot of pressure to be on the play if you're Zachary Bigelow because of Wrenn and 6. You called out there's not a lot of good 1-mana answers, like no spell pierces and stuff like that in Daniel's deck. Really needs to like Leyline Binding it, at which point you've already gotten a 2-for-1, like it's very likely to resolve. So having Wrenn and 6 on turn 2 on the play is so devastating that being on the play is really, really powerful for Zachary, and I think that's a play he's really going to be looking for here in game number 2.
Yeah, this creativity deck, like you said, always wants to Wrenn 6 on 2 and then Fable the Mirror Breaker on turn 3. And from then on, you're on the gravy train. You've got these 2 permanents that are kind of hard to answer cleanly with a 1-on-1, and you can kind of play this mid-rangey value game until you explode with your combo on a Dwarf or a Treasure or a Goblin or what have you. But Daniel's happy just play Spara's Guild Hall, I think it is, and then just
headquarters. You're close.
Headquarters Guild Hall. Oh man, each one has a different name, so you can figure out, what kind of is it? Is it
Yeah, well, you designed them, so I'm sure that, that they have different names through development. I can't fault you at all. That's certainly a unique perspective you're going to bring to the table as far as having worked around these cards and the various name changes and design changes they had. Very, very powerful and modern. I only ever saw the final results, so even if I struggle with the alternate art sometimes, the names, I got those.
Known by Bench Triome by many other people like that. Xander's Lounge, Grixis Triome, perhaps to some people. But
I like Grixis Triumph. I have a complaint. I'd like to. You're now my complaint department. They should have been Triumphs.
That's why I'm here.
They should have been Triumphs. It was such a good name. It's such a good term. You didn't use it. Why aren't the other half Triumphs?
Yeah, well, maybe a reprint happens and we go back. They go back to Ikoria, and maybe it's with a different name, kind of Triumph. But Daniel is really happy to see that there's no Wrenn 6 on Zachary's side, and we see some the one copy of Preordain in Azorius Control. Daniel was making his deck list. I've got 59 perfect cards. What is this 60s card to really bring the deck together? Oh, it's Preordain. That's the rug that I'm looking for in my rug plus.
Love it.
White.
Love it. The math. People talk about building decks and some math involved. One Preordain, definitely some math involved there. Although I think it's quite demonstrative of Daniel's change in approach here in game 2. You talk about how people sequence things and like what it implies about their hand. This is the turn where Teferi can come down, and that's a very impactful card in this matchup. The fact he's willing to tap out to Preordain here, I think speaks to having an answer to Teferi already in hand. Either his own Teferi, kind of just to have it on both sides, or a Leyline Binding or something of that ilk. Even pitch cast subtlety, whatever, those kinds of effects. I think it speaks to his willingness to tap out implies that he has Teferi covered in some way or another right now. as here comes Blood Crypt, untapped for Zachary Bigelow. Clearly intends to cast something. We'll see exactly what that will be.
Yeah, or maybe on the flip side, maybe Daniel had no answer to anything, and I've got a Preordain to cast on turn 1. I'm looking for lands, perhaps. Azorius control players love hitting their land drops, so maybe you're looking for lands. But here comes the correctly guessed Teferi from Zachary. It resolved, no Force of Negation here, and tick up Teferi and just pass it back. And Zachary is really looking for not a 1-to-1 answer to this Teferi. No Leyline Binding, because that's a valueless Teferi, which is quite sad. But we're going to see what Daniel has. I did see a Teferi of his own that maybe we'll deploy, and we're just going to have a Teferi mirror match. But if Zachary untaps with a Teferi and these 3 mountains and a fetch land and a creativity, that Archon could make an appearance, or maybe even a Terracodon to blow up all.
You want to see you with the blowing up lands? It's just going to be a theme all day, isn't it? All day.
Normally, I've been a big Commander player, and blowing up lands is kind of frowned upon in that format. But here in Modern, I want the games to end on a Prismatic Ending. With a
Prismatic Ending, the 1-for-1 exchange that you were kind of talking about is kind of not a total disaster for Zachary Bigelow. Prismatic Endings do have plenty of good targets over the course of the game. Ren and 6 and cards of that like among the mix. But like you said, not being able to cash it out for anything, just a 1-for-1 does feel bad for having had a resolve Teferi. And now, grabbing the Dwarven Mind, it could be creativity time, and Subtlety doesn't stop that one. Would need to be Force of Negation for Daniel Weiser in order to actually stop this creativity from this point. Should Zachary Bigelow go for it, a good spot to be set up if you're a Zachary fan in this matchup.
Yeah, Solitude, however, is a way to remove the target of the creativity. So really, 4 copies of Solitude, which I think Daniel has one in his hand, and 2 Negation are the only cards that can interact with it. So if I was Zachary, I would definitely fire this off and see, if you got it, you got it, but maybe you don't got it.
Oh, what a disaster for Zachary. I think he has both Force of Negation and Solitude in hand, can cover it from both angles.
And Zachary has kind of not a defeated look, but like a, here's my opening salvo, do what you got to do, and we'll see what happens. And there is the white pitch elemental comes down, pitching a Teferi. Wow, he killed a Teferi and then used his own Teferi to stop the spell from happening. And yeah, that is an attempted combo. And back to the Azorius control player, who is probably still in the driver's seat now that he failed 1 attempt. Zachary could answer back. Zachary has 2 cards left on a mold of 5, no 2-for-1s on his side. Maybe he fetch lands and then plays another creativity. We don't know. But we'll see.
A strong mold of 5 for sure. I really like this sequence from Zachary. I think he did a good job setting this up. Daniel fetching very quickly. Is it the One Ring? It sure is. Here comes the One Ring. Protection from everything has Daniel Weiser, and an extra card in hand too for his trouble. Over back to Zachary we go. Had a very impressive turn 3, very impressive turn 4. Fable left in the chamber. A great hand. Silence picked up. Would have been great last turn. Not going to really get it done this turn, I don't think. The last turn didn't have the extra mana laying around either. So really, just kind of tied on raw resources as Zachary is kind of the case when you're mulliganing. Here comes Fable the Mirror Breaker, and here comes the Force of Negation. Another 2-for-1 for Zachary, but the One Ring's going to undo all of that in a near instant.
Yep, so Zachary doesn't have a lot of options. He was trying to transition into a mid-game plan with the Fable the Mirror Breaker. Now there's really other things to do, but that is kind of what Fable does, is transition from a combo-oriented attack plan to kind of a mid-range. And there's one thing that really puts a damper in the mid-range plan. It's a 1 ring by your opponent. So Dan's going to draw 1 card, 2 card, 3 card, 4 card, bounce you 1 ring. And that's kind of oftentimes in the book because, in the olden days, you'd have to drop to 7 cards in your hand. I've got a counterspell. Maybe I have, some other kind of counterspells, but I can use my mana. Nowadays, you've got Force of Negation, you've got Solitude, you've got Subtlety, and maybe you have like some cheaper counterspells, like in the form of Veil of the Summer, which is a counterspell, or an Aether Gust. But it's looking, that door, we talk about the door shutting in game 1. That door, there's not a lot of light coming through the door left for Zachary as Daniel amasses his resources with the Dovin's Veto in hand, it looks like, that 1 of copy. But it does get beaten by silence. So we'll see if Zachary can piece together, maybe, cast a silence. You got anything for this? No? Okay. Then combo up. But I'm not sure. But we'll see what Zachary can do.
Love this. He goes to fetch. In response to the fetch, we go for the silence. So gets to do a little bit of cat and mouse here. Instead of casting the silence proactively, gets to wait and see if Daniel has anything off of the fetch. And when he does, gets that silence off and now knows that he's going to get some value for his trouble. Now, it might be a little too late, but does force through this Fable the Mirror Breaker as Daniel does get to pivot into grabbing a Meticulous Archive instead of an untapped source. So it's a little bit of value for his trouble off of the fetch land, even though he did not get to cast this Dovin's Veto that he had in hand. But a cute trick with silence, one that I think a lot of players would have missed. in the moment. But yeah, like you mentioned just a second ago, this game looks a lot like game number 1, just happening 4 turns earlier, where, you know, it goes for a combo, there's a little bit of an interaction fight, and then Daniel has the One Ring in play, tapping over and over again as soon as the dust settles. And this is exactly the spot that Daniel Weiser's deck is looking to set up in Modern. 4 copies of the One Ring, tons of interaction. This is just exactly what this deck's looking to do, and has been able to enact its game plan now both games. We'll see if Zachary with Fable the Mirror Breaker can battle out of it.
Yeah, so Daniel answered the Goblin Shaman token for the Mirror Breaker in a very common way that you see in Modern, is with a 1-mana answer of Prismatic Ending. Meanwhile, Daniel has answered that Goblin Shaman token. He's going to play a Kahira of his own. So here's a 3-2. You know, he's got a Counterspell in his hand, a Dovin's Veto in his hand, and the odds that Zachary has a way to get a token and inspire creativity, and then a third piece of interaction for that Counterspell is looking really hard. And with Dovin's Veto, the number of counterspells you have for that card is even smaller than normal. So I think, Daniel, I like the heads up play of, you know, I'm at 13, you're at 15, I'm actually lower in life. The One Ring is kind of punishing me, so I'm going to play this 3-2 threat and start actually maybe getting some attacking in as we, you know, trade our resources.
Plotting the Pillage the Bog is Zachary post second chapter of Fable. And this, I think, really the story of this game looks to be like the One Ring and cards in hand and stuff like that when you talk about control mirrors and these kinds of setup. But really, it's been the mana differential for Zachary. He's had the tools over the course of the game. He's had the combo pieces. He's had the interactions, all that stuff. He just hasn't had the mana to deploy it all at once. Stuck at 4 lands. Well, Daniel continues to make land drops, then is able to interact, then able to play the One Ring holding mana up. All this stuff is a big part of the equation, is he gets to play his second copy One Ring, Legend rule out the first, so he doesn't take 4 damage anymore, and keep the card stream coming. Everything coming up, Daniel.
Yeah, we saw him play the Minamo, School at Water's Edge. This is a fun trick to maybe draw, you know, 5 more cards with the One Ring, which Daniel could have done right now, drawn 5 more cards and then play One Ring. But then you kind of be low in mana. And, you know, Daniel, it's yet again, this is Daniel's game to lose. And he doesn't want to open that door too much to let Zachary sneak through a creativity. You know, I'll keep that Dovin's Veto open. And I really like that play from Daniel, as Kahira is there on the board.
Rumbling across the beatdowns. Obviously, many turns until Zachary will actually die. I have to think that this is probably among the last turns, really, where Zachary is going to be able to battle his way back into this game. Now, with a reflection of Kiki Jiki in play, we're going to cast the Pillage the Bog that was blotted. And I think that also is very indicative that Zachary knows, hey, the door's closing fast. This is probably the least mana that Daniel will have untapped for the rest of this game. I need to make something happen now. And Pillage the Bog looking to make that happen. Daniel giving it some thought.
Yeah, so plot is so awesome in these like kind of control mirror matches, in that they let you spend your mana on a previous turn, and the turn where it matters, how about your mana available? Like here we have a Veil of Summer, which does does 2-for-1 counter that counterspell. But Daniel does have a Force of Negation to take care of the green 1 mana spell by, you know, pitching all these cards. Zachary's like, yep, the One Ring sure is a really good card.
He seems to sit back. Yeah, it's not what he wants to see at all. And it's actually funny. This is actually not even an exchange Daniel really wanted to make. You can tell with the way he tapped. He actually wanted to have his Veil as backup, thinking that, you know, Zachary would want to protect it with some form of counter spell. And, you know, he had Veil of Summer ready to go. But actually, Veil of Summer doesn't really work against an opposing Veil of Summer the way that he wants. So Daniel actually has to commit Force of Negation to the bit as well. And that might just be the door on everything for Zachary, who looks to be a little bit defeated as we head back to Daniel Weiser. One Ring now untapped. I don't even think he tapped it for cards. Just doesn't even need the cards anymore. What a flex.
And Daniel has the perfect 7. You know, I'll do it now. He's like, you know, actually, I could use some more cards. I do like playing Blue-Eye Control. Here's a Plains. And Daniel is going to see deploying, you know, just Aether Gust.
Aether Gust.
You have 1 non-land permanent in play. I would like to correct that, and you can choose top or bottom. It's up to you. So we'll see where Zachary unsleeves the reflection with a vengeance, and is thinking, you know what, where's this going to go?
Top or bottom? What you want? And this is so brutal with these cards too. They put the cards on top. It just implies so much about the way the rest of this game is going to go out. It's like, yeah, I don't care if it's on top of your library, but you're like, well, this is one of my best cards in the matchup. Do I want it or not? And it's like, well, if I put it there, I mean, it's something he knew. He could just answer it and cast it again. It's just, he feels so defeated. It feels like you have him covered from all angles. And honestly, that's not far from the truth. Daniel Weiser is now here on turn 8 or whatever comes Zachary Bigelow's 5th land drop. Long time late to the party.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it looks like there's not a lot of outs to Zachary, but I've played a lot and watched a lot of Reed Duke play Magic the Gathering, a very powerful magician. And Reed Duke never concedes. He will not concede until you attack and commit lethal damage or lethal milling or lethal poison in some way, because, maybe Daniel does something that is bad and then Zachary can win. Like, the game is not over until it's over. So it feels really bad to keep playing, my door, like I have to draw this one card and Daniel has to have 7 lands in his hand. And, I have to, all these things you line up, but like, you still want to keep playing because there's a chance for you to win. So, it kind of feels bad, but you got to keep doing it, because here comes a Surveil land. So notably, Zachary didn't get a Dwarven Mine with this fetch land and got a Surveil land. So maybe, he's looking for an out in some other way for a card, the one remaining card in his hand. I'm not sure.
Hard to feel like creativity is going to be good enough at this point in the game. All this mana available for Daniel, a bunch of cards. It's not even clear what gets you out, but it probably has to start with some of those powerful cyber cards we've already seen have kind of an outsized impact on this game, even though it hasn't really been enough to really work through Zachary's card disadvantage and his mana disadvantage he's had through this game. The Silence and Veil of Summer type cards have been impactful, and those types of things may be what he needs to piece together. But either way, does not find anything worth casting. Back over to Daniel we go. An attack with Kahira is going to try to find a lightning bolt before damage, and Counterspell indicates to me Daniel's got extra counterspells and is just looking to slam the door in this game. And into the red zone, connecting once again, is Kahira, the Orphan Guard. The clock doesn't have to be good for these Azorius control decks. That's been true all of time. There just needs to be one, and that's enough for Zachary Bigelow. He's going to concede this, and Daniel Weiser going to get it 2-0. Convincing victory, I'd say, over the Creativity deck. And it really shows kind of when you're playing a deck like Creativity that splits the difference between combo and control, is looking to do a little bit of both, and you're paired against a deck that really leans hard into one of the two, that deck's going to be way better at it. And that was true for Azorius Control, which was able to cover any early combo attempts as well as play better as a control deck as the game goes on. And I mean, that's just kind of a textbook unfavorable matchup, I'd say, and some masterful navigation from Daniel Weiser for a convincing victory.
Yeah, we saw sometimes the Creativity can be dominable. It doesn't hurt that when your opponent is mulling to 5 with indomitable Creativity. But yeah, we saw really good play on both sides. Sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles. We've seen 3 combo decks in our 2 matches so far, with the blue-white control player coming on top in his matchup. So looks like we're going to be talking. There's so much more of the NRG Champion Series here to come, and we're going to talk more about where we're going next.
Of course, this is NRG Minneapolis. This is the second event in our Season 1 that you're watching right now, the Modern 10K. After this event will be in May. We will be in Indianapolis for a double showdown weekend. If you're looking to play an event here in Season 1, you're looking for your best odds to qualify for the championship, this is it, as you have a Saturday 10K Modern Showdown, where we will qualify the top 4 for the regional championship, as well as obviously the winner into the end of the year NRG championship, as well as the myriad of other prizes on the line. This is a 10K, of course. And then on Sundays, another 10K showdown where the top 2 teams will get regional championship invites, and of course the winning team will get their NRG Championship Series invites as well. So a ton on the line there in Indianapolis coming in May. Mark those dates in your calendar, May 11th and 12th. And then to round out season number 1, we find ourselves in St. Louis to play Pioneer for the first time in a while. Of course, there's that team event in Indianapolis, but here you get Pioneer, a true focus on it, and that Saturday 10K Pioneer Showdown. Ton on the line there again. Top 4 regional championship qualifications, and the winner will go to the NRG championship. And then on Sunday, a little bit of modern action. If you like what you're seeing here today, mark your calendars there in June. Find us in St. Louis on Sunday to play for a lot of prizes there in modern. So 2 more events to round out here, season number 1 on the NRG series. A lot of exciting stuff coming up for us, as well as round number 3. We are at time in the round, I believe, from here. So we have no backup feature, and we will be back with round number 3 here very shortly. Don't go anywhere.